The two resurrections. We're looking at the two resurrections today, and you know, all of us will eventually die. So, what happens when we die? Are we resurrected at the same time? Is there one general resurrection of the saved and the unsaved, as some teach? Or are there two resurrections, one of the saved and one of the unsaved? The Bible tells us that when Christ returns in the air, the dead in Christ will be raised first and be reunited with their soul and spirit that comes down from heaven with Christ. And then the bodies of those that are alive will be changed and be called up together to ever be with Christ. So the Bible tells us in the clearest terms that all of the dead will be raised in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 13 through 14. And if you want to see about the catching up of the dead and the alive, called the rapture, that's in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18. It should be noted that the Bible does not teach that we shall all be raised at the same time. So there has already been a partial resurrection of believers when Christ was resurrected in Matthew 27, verses 52 and 53. And even so, many people and Christians have taught that there is only one general resurrection of all the dead at the end of the world. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that all men will be raised at the same time. Everyone will be raised and judged, but time and place or the judgments are the same. The two resurrections are different, occurring at different times, and the subjects are also different. See our video on the seven judgments of God, which clearly shows that the judgments are at different times. We can distinguish between the two resurrections as the resurrection of life and the resurrection of judgment in John chapter 5, verses 28 and 29. In the book of Acts, the two resurrections are also called the resurrection of the just and of the unjust. And that's in Acts 24, verse 15. The Apostle John in the book of Revelation tells us of the redeemed who lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished, according to Revelations 20, verses 4 through 5. There are three stages of the resurrection of believers. And there is a resurrection of believers when Jesus was crucified on the cross, as we mentioned earlier in Matthew 27, verses 51 through 52. Then there is a resurrection of all believers at the time of Christ's return in the air in 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 13 through 18, and 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 52. So then there's a third resurrection, is near the end of the tribulation, and it is of believers saved during the tribulation. In the first resurrection, we see the Lord descending from heaven, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Those Christians that have lived and are now dead will be raised first, according to 1 Thessalonians 4:16. Then those who are alive and remain are called up and given their new incorruptible bodies in 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 17. Christ will return in the clouds of heaven to catch up all believers to himself. After the catching up of the believers, they will be at the judgment seat of Christ, being judged for rewards, not sins. And the believers' sins were taken care of when they accepted Christ. Jesus paid for the believer's sins on the cross, and not only theirs, but the sins of the whole world. He offers it as a gift, so one must accept the gift. Remember that the disembodied spirits of those who die are instantly in conscious bliss or woe in hell. And they're awaiting the second resurrection. Luke chapter 16, verses 22 through 23. You can see our video on judgment and death. The second resurrection is when the unsaved dead are resurrected and stand before the great white throne judgment seat. And that's in Revelation 20, verses 11 through 14, and in chapter 21, verse 8. First comes death, and then judgment, according to Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27. So for additional information, see our video on what happens at death. The resurrection will be after the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ. Near the end of the 1,000 years, Satan will be loose for a season and will cause some to follow him. God will destroy those that rise up against the believers, and he will begin the great white throne judgment. At this second resurrection, it is only the dead, the unsaved, that stand before God, and they will be judged according to the works, according to Revelation chapter 20, verse 12 and verse 14. Notice that all believers have already been resurrected and given their new bodies. So it's only the lost that are dead. So the dead are the only people. The unbelievers are the only dead people. Let me put it that way. Only the lost in their resurrected physical bodies will appear at this judgment and will be judged for degrees of punishment. Their eternal destiny was decided at their death and cannot be changed, according to Hebrews 9:27. When it is time for the great white throne judgment, they will be resurrected, judged, and cast into a lake of fire for eternity, according to Revelation 21, verse 8. And I thank you for listening.